All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to our coffee shop series. I see people joining us already. Welcome Regina, Tracy, Amber. Thank you everyone so much for joining myself. I am Michelle with The Riveter, and we're joined today by Dr. DuEwa Jones and Kwanza Jones. Before we get started with them, I just want to say welcome to our 10 a.m. coffee shop series. We are so incredibly excited to have not only all of you, but these two powerhouse women joining us for this conversation today. Today's conversation is going to be how to stay supercharged in times of uncertainty. There's been so much movement and change and new normal to new normal to new normal lately in this country and all around the world. So Dr. Jones and Kwanza Jones are going to be talking about how to use that solidarity to find some solace and strength in these times. So thank you all so much for joining us. Before I do introduce our guests, I just want to remind everyone that we want to hear from you during this call as well. We want to hear your personal stories, your comments, your questions especially. So for those of you who are new to the Riveter platform and our events, I want to tell you the ways that you can participate on this call with Dr. Jones and Kwanza. So 2 ways that you out there can participate. So the first way you can participate is using the chat. If you hover your mouse down below, you are going to see a chat icon. Click on that, and that's where we want to hear your comments, your +1s, your stories. Just be sure to select to send to all panelists and attendees in that little gray drop down. That way we can all see your comments and stories. So if anyone out there wants to practice, go ahead and pop in. We love to know where you're listening and watching in from. I'm Michelle with The Riveter. I am in Denver. So if you want to pop that into the chat right now, that would be awesome. We can see where everyone's from. The second way you can participate is by using the Q&A. So again, if you hover your mouse down below and find the Q&A icon, you can submit your questions, you can submit anonymously, and you can also upvote other people's questions. So be sure to use that. We'll be answering questions throughout, but we're also going to be leaving time at the end for Q&A. So as things pop up, just put them in the Q&A. So again, the 2 ways you can participate is using the chat and using the Q&A. And I see people from, wow, West Virginia, LA, New York, Tijuana, Mexico, amazing. DC, fantastic. Well, welcome everyone. We're so excited to have you. Again, my name is Michelle with The Riveter, and this is our coffee shop series. And today we're talking about how to stay supercharged in times of uncertainty. Joining us, we are so incredibly fortunate to have with us these 2 amazing women. We have Kwanza Jones, who is the founder and CEO of SUPERCHARGED. So SUPERCHARGED is a lifestyle and personal development brand that boosts people to better and improve the world together. She also spearheads a philanthropic grant-making and investment organization called the Kwanza Jones and Jose E. Feliciano SUPERCHARGED Initiative. They invest in individuals and organizations and early stage growth ventures. And you know we love our venture capitalists and entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, female founders out there. So we want to welcome Kwanza Jones on the coffee shop. And then also joining us, we have Dr. DuEwa Jones, who earned her PhD from Stanford. She's a researcher, grant writer, creative scholar, poet, professor, the list can go just on and on. And she teaches courses that focus on African-American literature, music, visual art, and graphic novels in the Department of English at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. So I don't get to do this often, and I am super duper excited because I don't always get to introduce sisters, if the last name didn't give it away. But I am from a family of 4, and siblings is just me and my sisters, so I know that no one knows me better than my sisters. So I'm so excited to have not only 2 powerhouse people on here, but sisters. So with that, I am going to hand it over to the both of them, and they're going to tell you a little bit more about each other, and then they're going to get into their coffee shop conversation. So with that, thank you so much for being with us today, Dr. Jones and Kwanza. Welcome.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, see, this is what sisters do, as I'm sure
you know, Michelle, for those on the in other countries and on the East Coast.
Exactly. Welcome to everyone. And what we do, as you all may see, is we're going to try not to talk over each other. But for anyone who has siblings or family members or cousins or people in your family, all of that, who can be eloquent and at the same time loquacious. You understand, it means sometimes we like to talk, and we like to talk a lot, especially when we're with family. And now I am here today with my sister and my family member, and also, you see, Boo's friend, my Boo's friend, DuEwa Jones. Now, she can tell you whether or not you have to call her Dr. Jones. Her students probably do. Or I call her Meta, because, you know, we've known each other all of our lives.
Meta's fine, unless you're my student and I'm grading you. First name doesn't quite work when you're like, I don't want that. I want that A. I'm like, not that easy. You can earn him one though.
So what we're here today is to just share with the Riveter and to share with you all and be in solidarity and in support and talk about how, because we can be in solidarity together, that can be a source of strength. It can also be a source of solace. So Meta, why don't you go ahead and do some introduction too, and then I'll do some more, and then we'll get started with everything that we're here to talk about.
Wonderful. Well, one thing I would say as a poet and a scholar and a writer and a teacher is that solace, solidarity, and strength, they're alliterative, right? They're sounds, they all come together, and they also tie with sisters. And so while Kwanza Jones and I here are talking as biological kin, one of the things we know about family and family dynamics, part of solace and solidarity is seeing us as all part of the human kinship of family and connection. So you don't necessarily have to have bio kin to be family, right? But also that it is a part of the solace to see beyond those networks while also understanding the importance of strength we get from those close to us and from those far from us.
So as Meta was talking about the strength that we can get from those who are close as well as far, let's do this in this moment of solidarity.
Yes.
And showing how we are one. And we're going to do something a little lighthearted right now. And that is, this is called the coffee shop. Right. So for those of you who are with us together here in this moment, in this space, although the space may be digital, our feelings, our connections are real, and they can be as close as being physical can be. So I want everyone to get whatever beverage you may have in the coffee shop, because here's a little secret. I don't drink coffee, but
I do, however.
Okay, so a tale of two sisters, and we have some other siblings too. They drink coffee. I'm the only one that doesn't drink coffee. So, but you know what I do drink? I drink water. So I'm going to drink my water, and I hope you all hold your glasses or your mugs or your cups or your tea, or I drink kombucha too, or your kombucha or your coffee, and let's all have a moment of sipping in solidarity for us being here together in this space and in this place to talk about how we can supercharge each other. And when we come together, we can also make each other better, and we can make the world better. And that's why we're so happy that the Riveter had us here to talk about this, because as we know, the events that have been happening have been in the midst of, I call it, of COVID and curfews. So in the midst of all of that, it went from people feeling very isolated to people now feeling very together, but also with a moment and moments of divisiveness. And we don't want that. So why don't we, I'm gonna get my water. Maida, where's your coffee? No, you said you didn't bring your coffee. Okay, you wanna tell them why you didn't bring your coffee?
So yes, those caffeine drinkers who are here with us will understand I had to have that a bit earlier than 10 o'clock so that I would be able to be very present with you. So that I'll go for round 2 of my cup of java later, but for now I'm joining my sister with coffee. Everyone, let's raise our morning glasses.
Our morning glasses of whatever beverage of your choice,
whatever
and let's have a sip to support solidarity and togetherness. That for me was very refreshing. Meta, what about you? Refreshing?
Absolutely. And one of the wonderful things about water and the concept of solidarity is just like air. If we think about that refrain, I can't breathe, breath is fundamental to human life, to all human life. And so the denial of breath to some lives is something that it's really heartening and encouraging to see that many people from a variety of walks of lives have come come together to stand in solidarity and say, we must all be able to breathe, right? We must all have the right to our breath. And that right should not be unjustly taken away from us. Water, too, is something that we need in life. It's the largest percentage of the composition of the planet, right? And so it's something to think about that as well, given the different relationship to water and how it was needed and used during many of the protests around this country and around the world.
So let's do one other thing, because here's the thing, it's Supercharged always, and the Riveter knows this. We were going to be doing an IRL event before COVID started, so that didn't quite happen, and we were going to be doing something that was going to help get people moving and up and inspired, and because it's Supercharged, it's all about going from inspiration to the most important thing, which is action. So as we are here and we're talking about solace and we're talking about solidarity and we're talking about strength, let us also, thank you all for indulging us with your sip of water or whatever beverage of your choice. Please let's also in this moment too, as Meta was talking even more about breath and breathing and the necessity of what that is, let's all join together right now and take a moment together. I'll count it in to take one deep breath where we will inhale and then we'll exhale. Here we go on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Inhale. Now exhale. Let's do it again. Inhale. Now exhale. So with that, I want to thank you all, because here's what happens. How powerful is it when we come together collectively to do things? And that's where the strength comes from. So just as we took this moment to have a morning drink, if you are in the world in a place where it's still morning, as opposed to afternoon or evening, just as that is powerful, and powerful it is to understand how breath is powerful and to collectively breathe is powerful. Know that we can do these things. We can do these things together collectively, even when we're not physically together. So we know with everything that has been happening, we have been seeing people come together in all forms of solidarity. And that is what's so important. But as we breathed in and had the luxury of breath, because as we know, not everyone has had this luxury, which should be an undeniable fundamental right to be able to breathe freely whenever and however you want to, whenever and however you choose to. So thank you all for doing this with us together. And right as we continue going into more about solace, strength, solidarity, I have a question for you. So I'm going to share my screen really quickly. And if it does not share, let me know, because Michelle with the Riveter is going to help us out just in case. We've got a backup in case the share on my end does not work. And I need you all to help out a little bit, because here's the thing. Like Meta said, she didn't bring her coffee because she thought, oh no, I may be waving it around and may spill. Action. The action of it spilling, she did not want it to happen. The action of you all participating with us is something that we want to happen. So I need to make sure that those of you, I am going to put up the screen share and let's just follow along with this. It's a quick survey that we're doing. So hopefully you can help us with the survey and we'll give you the results really soon. All righty, here we go. Okay, so can you see the survey? If you see the survey, give me a chat and say, yes, I see it.
Raise your hand. Right, I can see it.
Woo, woo, woo. See, technology worked for us today. And here's the thing, I love technology. I'm really good at everything, but sometimes it doesn't always go as you want. It did today. So here is the thing. Michelle talked about you sharing your stories. And that's what we are here to do, because when we share our stories, when our voices are heard and when we let them be heard, we are able to impact change. So there is a poll, and this poll, it's just called a share your story poll. In this, I want you to text the word poll riv, like riveter, POLLRIV. Text that word to me. I'm going to get it on my phone right here, and text me at 833-672-0275. Once again, you should see it on your screen. And I see some of you all, my phone is like blowing up. This poll I need you to take because I want to hear your voice and your story about how and when you have been impacted in this way. And Meta didn't even know about this poll. Meta, get out your phone and take this poll.
All right.
Okay. So while she is doing that, and I'm going to wait another like 30 seconds while people are having an opportunity to fill out this poll, because this really is also, I'm going to give you the real-time results afterwards, and then I'll send you the full results later in case some people join us a little later and don't have the opportunity immediately to take the poll. You can take the poll anytime throughout this entire presentation. You can take the poll later because we're just doing a really informal survey. So even if you're watching this when you're watching the recording, it's okay to take the poll then during that time too, and we'll put the results. So, all right, now I'm gonna do a countdown, 10 to 1, and then I'm gonna take the screen share off so we can continue and get back to what we're doing here. So that's 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. Hopefully you all have had an opportunity to share your story through the poll, and it was simple. You have 4 choices you can choose from. Let me stop my screen share one moment. Okay. Great. All right. And now I am right back. So, Meta.
Yes.
It's informal. It's informal. I need more water. Did you all hear that? It's like, it is informal. So I want to know from you, and then I also want to hear from everyone too, when the question of the poll was asked, what did you think of the choices?
I was struck, and if I may, Kwanza, my beloved sister, can we read those questions aloud, even though everyone saw them in the poll, just in case someone didn't have their phones with them, but they're logging on their laptop, or sometimes there's some people that have to switch back and forth, just so that those, maybe they can reply in the chat there if they haven't, or they missed the timing of the poll.
Absolutely.
So
the poll, you want to read it?
Yeah, sure.
Perfect.
Which applies to you? Have you ever been A, mistreated because of your race, ethnicity, B, mistreated because of your gender identity, C, all of the above, D, none of the above?
So that was the surprise poll for you all this morning, which is certainly, given the circumstances of everything that we know has been happening of late. Tell me, Beta, when you got the poll, now that you have read it aloud for everyone, give me your thoughts about it. What were you expecting? How did you respond?
Well, I will be honest, as a professor who does exams that sometimes have multiple choice questions, I always say to students, the multiple choice question after A through D usually has an E for explanation, right? And so the first thing I thought was, the most important thing that's happening right now, and I really am inspired by Supercharged in this way, about asking us to share our stories, is around the world, the signs in which people are sharing our stories gives us the E. It isn't just that people might be mistreated, A and B, without understanding the personal stories, right, of each of the individuals, the stories that come to light, we aren't able to achieve solace and solidarity, right? Yeah. Because otherwise we become just multiple choice statistics, right? Just a number, just a letter. So I think that is what I thought. And hopefully the solace and solidarity that I know that you and many of you out there in the river, that you are a part of cultivating and creating in this community will help us get to a world in which D, none of the above, will apply, as opposed to C, all of the above. And what I love about, and I think is, obviously you're my sister, so people will say I have the solidarity of being biased, but I think it's brilliant about the way—
Not always, you know how simple it can be sometimes.
Yeah, it can be biased either way. But this is what I love about how you frame this question, Kwanza, is the question about mistreatment because of race and ethnicity, gender, and gender identity was not limited to a specific race, right? Or a specific gender, or a specific identity. And I think that really matters in getting to the nuances of understanding how it is that different people can feel mistreated, and how the kind of culture of divisiveness that you at Supercharged and the River works to kind of counter, right, and work against, right? And I saw our cousin Regina Harmony, works towards harmony, is in here on the River as well, that works towards that kind of harmony, is that culture is about understanding that the solidarity that people are coming together to protest in the wake of is one in which people have been pushed out from the human family. But there are also people who are, let me say it differently. There are people in blue, right, who also feel that their humanity and their identity, that they too are being mistreated based on their particular positionalities or identities. And so the beautiful thing about sharing your story is that when we all share our stories, we are more likely to get to the kind of solace that comes from authenticity, honesty, and a truth seeking that supercharges justice.
Hey, Meta, all right, alliteration. You see, that's all I'm talking about. We were roommates, FYI, when we were at school at Princeton. We were.
She upgraded and supercharged my room situation. I have to say, since she was, I would have been in a very small, not very nice, they tore that building down at Princeton now, but waffly dorm, but she upgraded. I actually ended up on a higher floor too. So I suppose this many years later, I should say thank you.
Well, one of the reasons why I still like to inject a little levity inside of moments of moments of intensity, I will say, is because therein lies a moment where you can breathe. Sometimes you get so wound up and so caught up in what it is that you lose the care and love and feeding of yourself, which means then you cannot go on to find the strength that you need to when you come together. So a little lightheartedness in terms of me joking about Maida and I when we were back before the PhD.
Yes. Before Stanford, right?
Before Stanford, back at Princeton.
Yeah.
One of the reasons for even doing that was just to say, it's okay. And in the question that I asked in the poll, and Meta spoke a little bit more about that to you all, but in those questions, I was intentional in those questions and not limiting it to one specific race, one specific ethnicity, one specific gender, one specific gender identity. And the main reason why is if you foundationally across the board, if there is any moment where you have ever felt mistreated, then that is the moment and that is the opportunity for you to have solidarity and to gain strength and to have solace with the solidarity of others. And why? Why is because you start to understand it's not about the other.
Yes.
It's not about someone else. It's not their problem, his problem, her problem, its problem. society's problem. It's ours. Ours. Because in that moment of asking those questions, have you ever been mistreated in any of these ways? Not, are you a person of color who's been mistreated? Not, are you a woman who's been mistreated? Not, are you a transgendered person who's been mistreated? Right now, it's all about how have you ever been mistreated? Because when I see signs, and I see the signs that people hold and they say no justice, no peace, I'm always so wary when I see those signs because it makes it feel like justice is not in the hands of just us.
Right.
Justice is in the hands of just us. So when you go from that foundational question that was asked in this poll and in this survey where you all shared your story, that was you in that moment saying, I can recognize, I can relate, I can sympathize, I can empathize with how it feels to be mistreated. So if I can relate to that in my own individual life and experiences and stories, then I, in solidarity with others who have ever felt that way, can find solace and can find strength so that justice, which is predicated on just us, can occur. Because too many people start thinking that, oh, okay, it's the lawmakers, it's the politicians, they're the ones who have to come in and make these laws. It's the judges, they're the ones who have to come in and determine what justice is. But I say, if we in solidarity, coming from this common place and understanding of, we have all had moments where we have been mistreated or felt mistreated. Whether you think that mistreatment is real or whether it's just something you perceive or you feel. So when you have those moments and then you hear the stories of others who have had those moments, it should give you a moment of pause to say, how can I understand better? What can I do together in solidarity so we can then make things better for everyone? That is when justice is in the hands of just us, because at the end of the day, if you, me, Meta, all of you who are on this chat, all of you who are in the Riveter community, all of you who are our Supercharged Boost friends, if all of you understand that you have that power,
absolutely,
to create justice, that you, because justice is, before you go and think something about someone else solely because of how they look, where they were born, where they come from, what their gender is, any of those various other demographic factors that people like to take into place, and the labels that people use to divide, before you start thinking about that, think, if I want to be in solidarity and if I want us to be strong, supercharged and strong together, how can we do that? It's by understanding that justice is in just us, just our hands. So that's one way you're also able to find solace, because you know you're not alone.
And what I want to add, I love the just us part. And there's no just us without the sharing of the story. The key thing about thinking about solidarity, what about those of you out here who are listening who'd say, well, those who, for example, have unjustly murdered people and taken away their breath unfairly, they feel a kind of solidarity with other people who might tell competing stories about what has happened. And so one of the important things about Solace is that sharing our stories, each of you sharing your story openly, not having those stories suppressed by those who seem to sometimes be in solidarity with suppressing our stories and silencing our stories and telling a different and sometimes untrue story to justify silencing our stories. The key thing is that solidarity is sometimes used and abused as a word. And so what's significant about what Kwanza, you said, and that I love about your kind of, as a poet, I love the way that if we open apart these words, the way that the very words we use already tell a story. A word like someone's died because they were pinned under the knee. Okay. Someone died because they were pinned under the knee for a few minutes. Okay. Someone died because they were pinned under the knee for 8 minutes. Okay. Someone died because they were pinned under the knee for more than 8 minutes, almost 3 minutes of which that person was completely unconscious. Other people who were trying to share their stories of empathy and humanity and begged and pleaded along with the person who was pinned, pleading for that person's life, right? That's a very different way to share a story. And so what I say, and what I love about not only Supercharged, but about the work that I do as a writer and as a teacher and as a scholar and a professor, that great thing about language, whether it's English, Spanish, whether it is, any another, voila, because I do stuff in African-American literatures as well, and African diasporic literatures, that language is that tool for story sharing power. And so,
but Beta, I'm going to interrupt you really quickly.
Sure, please do.
Language is the tool, and this is where our worlds connect.
Yes.
Language is the tool for sharing stories if you take the action to share.
Yes.
If you have the story and you keep it inside only, and you do not take the action to verbalize it, to vocalize it, to get it out on paper, to get it out in digital form, if you don't take that action, the language can be there. The story can be there. The change will not be there because you've not done the thing that is necessary,
right,
to make sure there is solidarity so that you can strengthen our communities, our societies, our nation, our world. Okay, Beta, I just had to interject. Go ahead.
And I love that you said that, because think about people who have been within police departments who have not shared the story of officers who've used excessive force, who actually have felt silence themselves within their own departments. This is what I mean by there are multiple facets of a story. There are some people who actually use and abuse. I am not saying a few bad apples. I read an article that was like the disease tree, right? Which is a much more, a disease tree means that at some point, right, there's an organic call for a kind of accountability in a world in which I'd love to live in a world in which we did not have to have people in positions to seek justice for those who have become victims of violence in other ways, right? But I'm not saying I don't believe by all means that there's a police brutality survivor. It's just about a few bad apples. So I want to be clear about that. But what I am trying to say about what Kwanza, you just said, is without action. The key thing about what's happening in this moment right now, and I'm thankful to those of you who are taking action. Those of you who are taking action, action isn't just marching in the street or laying down the position. And I want to say, if there are any of you all who are listening here who have, as a part of your story of mistreatment, having experienced police trauma or experienced excessive use of force, right? Some people cannot go to the street and lay down or take a knee because it's too traumatic for them of their memories and physical embodied experiences of having been in that position and subjected to violence. So there are lots of different ways to share your story, to protest, to speak in this way. I think that that's important to say, that there's not, we need the writers, and we need the marchers, and we need the activists, and we need the organizers, and we need the institutional and civic leaders, and we need, thanks to you and KJSI, Kwanza, the philanthropists, right? We need all of these. We need the musicians. We need, we need the healthcare workers, right? And I said a healthcare worker because think about the story of Breonna Taylor, right? Think about the story of Breonna Taylor shot in her home. And now think about the story of Tatiana Jefferson, who was also murdered in her home, right? And so That particular story made some news, right? But it was the cumulative effect, right, of people sharing their stories and the willingness of you all to take action, not just in this very moment, but the moments that led up to this moment, right? The moments that precede, not before my life, the moments in which, you know, our parents, Kwanza, mommy and daddy, who were very active, right, in standing up for justice, both through the legal system, but also literally through, you know, nonviolent, specifically, right, nonviolent civic action in terms of desegregation campaigns. So I think that this part of sharing the story that we hope won't get lost is that the stories right now are not the only stories. And the reason it's so important, and I'm so thankful for the Riveter and for you, Kwanza, and for Supercharged for thinking of making this poll to ask people to share their stories, because some of the stories that you here will share or have shared in response to that poll are stories that need to be heard and that need to be amplified so that we get a nuanced perspective on, you know, what's the relationship between this idea of how we seek justice and who is the perceived victim, right? And not from a victim brutality perspective, but someone who has survived, right, or not survived police violence and brutality. Because the key thing is, the big stories that make the news are from people who have been murdered through excessive force. Yep. Think about the stories that the media does not cover of the number of bruises, the number of psychological traumas, the number of physical forms that literally do not get redressed. So if we don't have that, think about the videos that have circulated now that show how elderly individuals have been, excessive force has been visited upon them. And so I think that this is really important to think about the varieties of ways to look at here, the need for solace. So when people say things like, oh, all this rage, what about all this seeking for solace?
Correct.
Very different way to understand and tell a story, right? What about seeking for sustenance, right? Very different way to tell the story. And I'm reminded, right, those of you who remember, anyone out there in Louisiana listening in, when that AP press coverage, and then they took the photo down and the caption down, so it erased that story where two photographs, one of a white woman and a white man who were photographed waist high in water with some bread. Another someone with a bag, right? With both had bags, you know, and one caption said, right, people seeking or finding, right? They're trying to find food or whatever. The other caption said, looters. We all know the physically embodied, deeply brown-hued, right? And I said that as opposed to Black for a particular reason, not in an anti-Black way, but that it is no coincidence that unless we also address the issue of colorism, right? Not just the issue of racism. And I say this because some people, unfortunately, when you try to tell your story about feeling racially persecuted, right? Based on their own experiences, all of a sudden, they're like, I can't hear your story, right? But if we look at a number of these stories in thread, it is not, I hope, lost on many of you, and those of you in social media who have seen even the debate about when people say Latinx for Black lives, right? And then people who are Afro-Latino or Afro-Venezuelan, right? Afro-Colombian say, wait a minute, right? Like I'm for my life. Where am I in this way of telling a story, right? And the reason I say this is that those reckonings in which people are talking about these issues, right? The deeply, beautifully brown-hued complexions of Breonna Taylor, of George Floyd, right? Of Ahmaud Arbery, right? Somehow in different stories get framed as threat, right? And I am not saying this to be divisive. I'm saying this to ask us to be honest and attentive in how stories get framed. And so that to me is an important thing, right? That aspect of solidarity and the seeking for solace is also a seeking for signs of recognition, right? Around what stories are told about who's a threat. When Amy Cooper called the police and continually performed in hysterics and said, I am threatened, there's an African-American man threatening my life, oh my goodness, right? While this same person was sharing his story of feeling threatening and saying, please don't come near me, please don't touch me, as she approached that person aggressively, right? The story that got told is that the body that she occupied, the female body, the pale complected body, right? The particular phenotypical body could not be perceived as threatening. Even though, yes, please, yeah.
Because I know we're coming close to the time where it's a Q&A time.
Sure.
So everyone, we can continue this conversation, so don't worry about it. I'll tell you where and how. We can even go on more through this later. Yeah. But why I wanted to interrupt you in that moment is because when she made that call, would she say she's a racist? Who knows? Maybe she says she is, maybe she says she isn't. I certainly think based on the letter of apology,
which we have to get beyond the racist person and non-racist person to racist actions and non-racist actions.
But the reason I bring that up in particular is that was an instance of someone using their voice to gain solidarity with others, the solidarity that she wanted in that moment, solidarity of law enforcement officers coming to her aid based on her using her voice, in which the words she used, what she said, were lies.
Yeah.
So we have to be careful when we, thanks, I got a note from Michelle. Awesome, thank you. We have to, Quetta, I hear you, yes. We have to be careful when we look at ourselves, and back to that justice be in the hands of just us. In this instance, you're using your voice to gain the solidarity of others to do a thing that is at core unjust.
Yes, thank you.
You're using
just me, not just us.
Right? Exactly. That is a just correct. So please understand, everyone, all of us here, all of us who are live in our conversation here, all of us who may see this and watch this or hear this later, understand, and I say this always, words have power. Now, you may have grown up where people say sticks and stones can hurt your bone, may hurt my bones, but words will never hurt me. The words may not hurt you, but the words certainly have power. The words themselves may not cut you physically, but the words can cause you physical harm.
Absolutely.
So there is power in those words that you use. So always make sure you are choosing wisely the words that you use. Always make sure that when you are seeking solidarity, you are seeking solidarity with a sense of compassion, a sense of justice, a sense of what is good, a sense of what is right. Yes, of course, things are black and white, but fundamentally, we can know, you can see certain instances, fundamentally, and these instances of, let's talk about George Floyd, fundamentally, sitting on someone with your knee in their neck when they are expressing over and over again that they cannot breathe and they can't move, they can't cause you any additional harm. Fundamentally, then, all of us know that is something that is not right.
Absolutely.
So there are many instances where it can be, oh, shades of gray, let's see one side, or let's see the other. Fundamentally, it doesn't matter what people bring up about people's backgrounds or stories about, oh, well, this person had done this and they had done this or they had done this. Right. Let's talk about the precise moment.
That moment of now.
That moment of now. Fundamentally, we know that action was not right. Racism? How about e-racism? That's what we want to do.
Yeah.
So what I want to do, Meta, let's go into, because Michelle said, from the river to thank you all, we have about 4 more minutes. We were able to extend it 5 minutes before we get to the Q&A. Let's talk about supercharged, how to say supercharged, solidarity, solace, strength. The solace and the strength we get through solidarity. Give me the first word that comes to mind, or the first sentence that comes to mind when you think of the importance of solidarity in terms of gaining strength and finding solace. And specifically, a tool, because I like to give people things they can use, tools. First sentence or first word? What's a tool? Why is it important? Why is it important to have solidarity, to find solace and gain strength? And how can one go about doing that? Because while you're thinking, Meta, I want to break down one thing that I will say is a tool that you gave, whether you defined it as a tool or not. Oh, I love it. We have support system. Yes. Yes. The other tool is the importance of the sharing the stories. That is a tool that you were telling and saying, people, share your stories, because in sharing your stories, that's how you can find solidarity. That's how you can find someone that you can connect with and you can say, wow, I am not so alone. Absolutely. I'm not so alone. And oftentimes when you know you are not the only one who is going through something, that's that thing that helps you get through it. Just the knowing. So sharing your stories, finding a support system, even through sharing your stories. Give us some more, Meta.
Well, I was hoping we would hear from people here, but on our chat thread. But what I suppose in terms of what you're saying about kind of what are the words that come to mind to answer that question, right? Solidarity, solace, and strength. The word that, in terms of you were saying concrete things, right? Their support system. Let's read what someone now has provided. Thank you. You want to?
Sure. So this one, we have one of our participants and attendees who said, one form of solidarity to me is having empathy for others. Using the tool of patience to understand different cultures, backgrounds, perspectives, etc. Strength and solace can be found through empathy.
Absolutely.
And one thing that I liked about that specific tool that was given is, it was actually a 2-in-1, so you all got a twofer.
Thank you. Yes.
It was not just empathy. Thanks, Eric. It was patience too.
Yes. Yeah.
Because having patience to know it's not always just like that, that something is going to be right. It's not always just like that, that change will happen. But it means you can just, in a moment that goes just like that, understand that it can have longer lasting implications.
Yes.
And you can also understand that although a moment just like that can happen, that you need to make sure you're taking your time to think, to breathe, to have patience, but not to become apathetic.
Right.
To have patience, even when you know the process needs to change, not to be just complacent while you're having patience, but just knowing at times having patience can give you a moment to also find and have empathy.
And deepen your empathy, right? Not just have empathy, right? But to deepen it. If we think about it from the metaphor of the water that you began with, right? How deep is the ocean, right? There are some who have surface empathy, right? Surface empathy sometimes appears when someone quickly says, I feel so sorry for your pain. But if in fact you because you know, in the moment that you posted a video or you shared your story of some mistreatment, but the moment you want to share your story again with another kind of angle on it or another way of exploring how to process your pain, right? It becomes, oh, no, right? Deepen that empathy to truly, I love it, what you said, Anna, thank you. Vulnerability, right? Because empathy means our capacity to be present with each other in our vulnerability, right? And I'm going to say something very empathetic, having said what I said about Amy Cooper. Something I thought about was the fact that she chose to say, I'm going to say an African-American man. On the other hand, another way to look at it, a true human connection, implicitly admits that if I say a white man, right, is threatening my life, a white man has almost come to sexually assault me, and that's not what that person was doing. But if I say my husband, right, if I call the police on my husband and I don't describe him as an ethnic or racialized other to me, right, maybe I'm afraid they won't come to my aid. Now, she was being dishonest, right? But I want to say this because I think it's so important that we don't fall into or lack the ability to have human connections across ethnicities, races, cultures, backgrounds, as Eric pointed out, right? That we don't use this moment of solidarity as a moment to say only certain people have pain, right? Only certain people suffer. I don't believe that. We all, right? I mean, we all, that's not how we were raised, Kwanza. That's not you at all what, you know, mommy and daddy, oh, I just said that on. Major, but parents, excuse me, our parents, not mommy and daddy, but our parents.
Our parents.
But yeah, that's
daddy forever.
Mommy, daddy, forever.
So let me do this because I know we're coming close to the time of Q&A, and I wanted to give the results of that survey, especially as a way to wrap up some of Meta and all of you all, our sips of coffee and water and juice and tea and kombucha and all these sorts of things. As a way to begin to wrap this up, I wanted to say, when we think about empathy, Eric talked about that. We think about patience. When we think about vulnerability, which Anna spoke about, when we think about human connection and the capacity to see beyond just this, whatever this physical thing is, right? This physical expression of gender, or this physical expression of race or ethnicity. When we think beyond that and we truly get to the core of what's underneath that, which is that human connection, and Meta, you were talking about that, that is what this survey was about. And here were the results. The results were 9% of you said felt you have been mistreated. You've ever been mistreated because of your race or ethnicity. 39% of you said you have been mistreated because of your gender or gender identity. 52% of you said you have been mistreated because of all of the above. That means either your race or your ethnicity or your gender or gender identity.
Or
so
and,
those of
right?
you, for the math, if you want to do some quick math, you add up all of those percentages, the 9%, the 39%, the 52%, what percentage is left that said none of the above?
I was listening, I didn't write
Zero.
Zero. Wow.
Zero.
Wow.
There is no one in our coffee shop conversation today that has felt that they have never been mistreated because of those factors.
Yeah.
And that, my friends, my Boost friends,
yes,
is what connects us all.
Absolutely.
What connects us all is the capacity to understand that we have felt and been mistreated, perceived and or real. And that is the moment where we can gain solidarity and understanding and having empathy and having patience and expressing the vulnerability and being open and sharing that. So thank you all for sharing that. And those who may be listening later, please do the poll. I'd love to hear even more results. And it's an anonymous poll. Do the
Well,
poll.
I love that you said, when you said those kind of gender identity, race, we think about the murder of Tony McDade, right? And so that sense of, if only one of those in Florida, if only one of those identities, if you say it's Black trans man, well, if you take only one of those identities for mistreatment, then you actually are not honoring their experience, right, of mistreatment based on that identity, right? So thank you so much for that, Kwanza.
Yes, thank you both so much. I definitely want to answer a question or two before we leave. So
great, please do, Michelle, and thank you again, Michelle and the Riveter. Thank you, thank you.
Oh,
absolutely,
thank you, truly. Thank you both for being here. I know it's a lot to ask, and you're just so generous with your time. And thank you so much for sharing that, building solidarity amongst our Riveter community and all of those out there who will watch this later as well, and creating that connection. That was a great poll. I didn't even know what was going to be on the poll, so that was a fun surprise for me. But yeah, submit your question if you have one in the Q&A below. But before we do get to Q&A, because I feel like this conversation could go on much longer, and it should. It really should be continued throughout, whether that's through people contacting you directly, following on your social medias, or reaching out however they may, even if it's a one-on-one conversation. So with that, I do want to ask you both to share with our audience today how they can follow up with you after this, how they can follow along with you in your journey, and potentially reach out if they want to continue this conversation. Dr. Jones, why don't we start with you? How can people continue to follow along with you?
You can follow me on Twitter. I'll put it in the chat thread at Muse is Music. That's my, I'm gonna put Muse is Music. You can find me there. I'm also available. If you look, you can find my email at UNC Chapel Hill, but it's better to follow me on Twitter at Muse is Music. Comes from the title of the first book that I wrote.
Tell us a little more about that book you wrote.
Go ahead. Oh, okay. So it's a book that's about jazz and blues and hip hop and how it influences poetry and music and that tradition from the Harlem Renaissance back in the jazz age of the 1920s up to the spoken word movement that came out through the 90s and early 2000s. So I'm currently working on a project called Black Alchemy, which actually is looking at how writers, poets, scholars, artists really engage in disparate forms of not just Black girl magic. And we think about alchemy as magical and transform, but other forms of transformative ways of using their experiences of visiting, traveling, photographing, painting things through their experiences throughout the African diaspora to transform the way we read, think, and see.
And people can find more information on both your book and your upcoming projects on Twitter is the best way?
Yes, and at UNC Chapel Hill's website, you can find me as an academic. If you Google, I'll put my name again. It's not, but the key, DuEwa Jones, if you put that in, you'll find me and find more of my work. I'm also online at academia.edu, so you can find
me. If you don't find her, I'll find her for you.
Oh, she can find me anywhere. She's probably one of the few, and among my other siblings as well. Our two, not mine, but our other siblings.
Perfect. And Kwanza, how about you? How can people follow along with you? And tell us a little bit about what Supercharged has coming up.
Oh, okay. I sure will. Let me, I'll do the same thing in the short term that Meta has done. And that is, you can follow me on Twitter and all social media at the Kwanza Jones or at IamSupercharged.com. And then you can also, and I'll pull this up for you too, you can also text me. And you can text me at 833-672, I'm gonna put it in here, 0275. And if let's see. Here we go. And if you text me there, let me screen share this because this will be helpful too. Okay. And you'll have to let me know if you can see my screen share.
You've got it.
Okay, perfect. So in the chat thread, I gave you my text and that's gonna come to be directly here. So what'll happen here is if you text me and if you also text TBCRIV, like to be continued, as in our conversation is going to be continued, then I'll know that it was a continuation from our conversation from today here, or from something that you may have watched if you watch this later. So that's it. You can take a screenshot it, or if you are doing this, or go back and watch it, and then you can grab this information or read the threads. And essentially what we have going on at Supercharge are a lot of different things, a fewer things than we had IRL, because obviously we all know some of the things that happened there. But essentially we have our Boost Friend community. And what we do with the Boost Friend community is we help people not only improve their lives, but improve the lives of others. So one of the things that we talk about is Supercharge is your source for self-improvement. Because at the end of the day, if you don't improve yourself, it makes it very difficult for you to go in and try to improve the world. You need to start with yourself, and then you need to expand even outward. So those are some of the things that we're doing at Supercharged, as well as one other thing, which I will say, be on the lookout for through the Kwanza Jones and Jose Feliciano Supercharge Initiative, which is a separate but affiliated organization for Supercharge. We're going to be doing and announcing pretty soon some grants and some fellowships to be able to take that, so people can take advantage of trying to get additional resources, whether it's for their business or whether it is to help them throughout this time of, as we know, COVID and the impact that that had, over 32.6 million people being unemployed, as well as those who have lost their businesses as a result of some of the social unrest. And so we just want to help in whatever way we can. So reach out, send me a text, be on the lookout for all of that, and more to come soon about that.
So with that, thank you so much, Dr. Jones. Thank you so much, Kwanza, for being with us today. If you all out there enjoyed this conversation and want to keep the conversation going on the Riveters digital platform as well, we have a Changemakers group. Just go to groups, you'll see Changemakers, definitely join them. And don't forget to join myself and your community manager, Katie McCauley, today at 3 o'clock Pacific time. Today's Power to Monday, we're actually going to be talking about some changes we're making as far as programming goes. Not major changes, but just things we want to let you all know about so that we can help you plan your days, we can help support you, bring levity to you all, and bring you the tips and tricks and webinars for all of you skill seekers, change makers, self-care seekers out there. So join us at 3. And again, thank you so much, Dr. Jones and Kwanza, for being with us.
Thank you, Michelle. It's been wonderful.
And I appreciate on follow-up conversations on this as well. I hope we can have you back soon.
Yes, it'd be our pleasure.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Be safe and well out there, and we will see you soon.
Bye, everyone,
Bye.
And stay safe.
Bye,
everyone.
See you soon, Kwanza, too.
Yes, mate, with our mask on.
Yes.